I am the window through which she waited for him, until she understood that he would not return. I am just a window, one of those old wooden ones that creaks in the wind and fills with dust over time, but I witnessed something that not even time could erase. You know when you wait so long for someone that you start to forget what life was like before that wait? I saw everything, every smile, every tear, every time she believed he would come back, and every time silence responded in his place. But what do you do with so much love when it has nowhere else to go? Stay with me until the end, because there are things that only those who watch from the outside can tell. The house was white, although it was already losing its shine, with the paint peeling in the corners, as if even the walls had grown tired of waiting. I would stand right there in the middle of the facade, at the window of the front room, overlooking the cobblestone street and the life that went on without asking permission. The branches of the mango tree almost touched me on windy days, and sometimes the birds would come and make their home on my windowsill, as if they had chosen me to keep their silence and secrets. It was there, on a December afternoon, that the mango tree appeared for the first time, gently pushing my leaves aside, as if asking permission to see the world through me. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, but there was something in her eyes that carried the weight of many lives. Her hair was loose, dark as the slowly approaching night, and her arms were resting on the windowsill as if she were searching for answers on the horizon. She didn't speak, but her eyes said it all, a mixture of hope and fear, as if she were about to find something she had always dreamed of, or lose something she didn't even know she had. The sun was shining from the side, painting her face with shadows that danced as the breeze blew through the cracks. And it was at that moment that I knew she was waiting for someone. And that wait would last longer than anyone could have imagined. The next few days went like this. She would gently open the curtains every morning, sit for hours in front of me, and stare. She would do nothing but stare. Sometimes she would smile, sometimes she would cry softly, as if she didn't even want me to hear, but I did. The smell of coffee and fresh bread came from the kitchen, and the sounds of the city, distant horns, children's laughter, the cornmeal vendor, filled the background like an improvised soundtrack. But nothing was louder than the silence between us, between her and the window, between her and the world. It was one of those mornings that he showed up, tall, thin, with a backpack on his back and eyes that were desperately searching for something. When he saw the house, he smiled like someone who had found their way back. She saw him first in the reflection in the glass and ran. I opened my mouth without resistance, and she passed me like the wind, crossing the house to the door, and when she opened it, they hugged as if they were made for each other. I had never seen a hug last so long. He smelled her hair, she rested her face on his neck, and they stayed there for minutes, as if that was the only safe place in the world. That's where it all began. The love, the story, the promise. And I was there. Every time he came, she opened my pages with more joy. He brought flowers stolen from some garden, carefully folded letters, sweets wrapped in colorful paper. They sat in the room on the bed next to me and spoke softly. They laughed. They cried. He promised to come back, she promised to wait. And I heard it all. But that was also when the silence began to prepare to return. Because love, sometimes it comes with a hidden deadline, and no one wants to read the expiration date. And even though I was just a window, I began to feel that the silence that existed before everything was about to return. Only this time with much more weight. Now, tell me, are you ready to know how far the wait goes for those who love too much? If so, I'll tell you everything. Because this story hasn't even started yet. In the beginning, waiting for him was almost a sacred ritual. Every morning, before the sun had even fully risen, she was already there, in front of me, with her hair tied up in a mess and that anxious look that tried to disguise her longing with hope. The world was still half asleep, the streets wet with the early morning dew, and I, an old companion of wood and glass, opened my eyes to the sound of the usual creaking, as if announcing that another day of waiting was beginning. She held a cup of coffee in her hands, always the same one, chipped at the rim, and rested her elbows on the windowsill as if it were her permanent home. And there she would stand, looking at the path he used to take, as if at any moment he would appear at the end of the street, with that smile that dispelled any uncertainty. Deep in her eyes, there was an almost childlike faith, the kind that doesn't doubt, that doesn't question, that just believes. She repeated the same gestures every day, as if that could make time go by faster. She fixed her hair, changed her clothes 3 or 4 times. Sometimes she ran back to her room just to put on lipstick. Then she would regret it, take it all off, and come back with a clean face, like someone who wants to be seen in the most authentic way. It was beautiful to see, and at the same time, painful. Because while she waited, time didn't stop, and he didn't come. But she didn't give up. Not even when it rained and the wind pushed my leaves hard, not even when the city seemed empty of hope. She kept the window open, even when the cold cut through the air, as if she was afraid it would pass by and not see her. I, who had already seen so much happen here, began to understand that what she felt wasn't just love, it was need. A kind of emotional dependence that grew like ivy on the walls of the house, silent, beautiful, but dangerous. In the early days, she still received letters. He would leave them at the entrance of the building where he worked, and a delivery boy would bring them to the house. She would read and reread each one as if they were relics. She would cry hugging the paper. She would kiss the words as if she could taste his mouth there. Sometimes, she would read them out loud, facing me, as if she wanted me to know how much he loved her. And I would listen. Every promise, every sweet word, every, "I'll be back soon, wait for me." And she believed. She always believed. The neighbors began to notice. Some spoke to her with pity in their eyes, others with hidden irony. A lady from the house next door said that it was better for her to move on, that no man is worth that much. But she just smiled, a sad and tired smile, and came back to me. I was her refuge, her altar. And every time she touched me, I felt the weight of longing that she carried on her shoulders. It was also during those early days that she began to write to him. Pages and pages, all carefully folded and stored in a shoebox under the bed. She never sent them. He said it was just to organize his thoughts. But I knew it was more than that. It was an attempt to keep alive a conversation that was already beginning to die. At night, she slept with her head resting on the windowsill, as if waiting for a good dream that never came. And I, old and immobile, covered her with silence. She talked to the stars. Yes, sometimes she would open the window in the middle of the night, when everyone was asleep, and whisper to the sky. She would ask if he was okay, if he was thinking about her, if he still remembered the smell of the house, the texture of the patchwork quilt they used when they watched movies on the bedroom floor. And I, with the moon reflected in me, felt a pang of pain I didn't know I could feel. One night, she brought a candle and lit it right in front of me. She said in a low voice, "If you still love me, come back before this candle goes out." And she stood there, looking at the flickering flame with teary eyes. The candle burned down until it almost burned the saucer. And it didn't come back. But the next day, she was there again with the same coffee, the same look, the same faith. Little by little, the brightness in her eyes began to change. It wasn't the same anymore. There was still hope, yes, but there was also a new shadow, a question that hid between her tired eyelids. What if he doesn't come back? But she didn't let that doubt grow. She cut off the thought before it could take root. And she distracted herself with the little things, the smell of bread, the sound of the city, the movement of the mango leaves. But I saw everything. And I knew she wasn't yet ready to accept what, perhaps, was already true. Deep down, I think she believed that waiting was a way to keep love alive. That as long as she was there, with the window open and her heart willing, it couldn't disappear completely. And maybe she was right, because her love filled the house, seeped through the cracks, mingled with the smell of old wood and dust accumulated in the corners. It was a love so great, so intense, that it seemed to defy logic. But time has its own way of proving otherwise. And it was there, in those first days of waiting, that she transformed. Not into someone else, but into someone deeper, more sensitive, more fragile. I remained here, a silent witness, an involuntary accomplice to a love that, little by little, began to hurt more than it enchanted. But the pain was just beginning. There was something about the way Noelle smiled that made the world seem less heavy, less urgent, as if, for a few moments, everything stopped just to see that smile happen. It was the kind of smile that started slowly on the sides of the lips, but spread all over the face and ended in the eyes, which shone as if they were hiding stories that no one else knew. And Elisa, Elisa knew that shine like someone who knows the way back home in the dark. Every time he appeared at the end of the street, backpack thrown over one shoulder, hurried steps, her heart beat faster, and even before I opened the door, she was already running towards me, pushing my sheets so hard that sometimes I creaked loudly, as if I was also hurrying to see him arrive. Noel would come in silence, but his silence was not empty. It was filled with urgency, longing, and unspoken promises. He would bring used books under his arm, poems written on napkins, a flower stolen from some square, sometimes a new song on his headphones that he would take out just to share with her, saying, "Listen to this, it sounds like us." And Elisa would listen, always with her eyes closed, as if each note were a memory to be kept with care. Her room would fill with laughter, soft music, whispers, and I would let the wind in slowly, just enough to sway the curtains and spread the scent of the two of them throughout every corner of the house. They had a way of touching each other as if they were still learning about each other's existence, even though they already knew every detail. Elisa ran her fingers through his messy hair, counted the moles on his back, guessed his thoughts just by the way he rested his chin on her shoulder. Noel would rest his forehead on hers and say softly, "If I close my eyes now, will you still be here when I open them?" And she would laugh, finding the question funny, as if it were obvious, as if she would never be anywhere else. But there was something in Noel's eyes that didn't always smile. Something hidden, as if part of him was always about to leave, even in the happiest moments. Elisa didn't see it, or pretended not to see it. Maybe because love, for her, meant trusting without question, accepting even silence, even temporary absence, even the pain that comes disguised as longing. And I, who saw everything from the outside, began to realize what she didn't want to admit, that Noel never stayed long enough. That he always came and always left. Even so, every time he came back, Elisa's world would change. She would wash the sheets, change the flowers in the vases, light candles on the windowsill, and leave the whole house smelling of lavender and freshly baked bread. And when he knocked on the door, she would open it before the second ring, as if she already knew the exact time he would arrive. They would hug each other right there, in the doorway, and remain silent for long minutes. And I felt the wood of my body vibrate with the intensity of it. One afternoon, after one of these arrivals, Noel brought in a music box. It was small, dark wood, with a rusty mechanism that still played a soft melody when he turned the crank. "It belonged to my mother," he said. "She listened to it when she felt the world was falling apart. Maybe it works for us too." Elisa placed the box in the center of the dresser, next to the window, and every night she turned the key until she heard the first chords. It was their music, the soundtrack of waiting, of love, of brief presence and long absence. They had a world of their own, and I was part of it. I witnessed card games that lasted for hours, poems written together, improvised dinners on the bedroom floor, with cheap wine and laughter. They created memories like someone trying to capture time with their hands. But time always escapes. And with it, Noel escaped too. At the end of each visit, he would say, "I'll be back soon." Elisa didn't ask when or why. She just nodded with a serene smile, even though her eyes were already starting to fill up. She would close the door slowly, lean against me, and stay there, looking back where he had gone, as if she could follow him with her gaze until he disappeared into the distance. I knew that each soon of his could mean days or months. But in that moment, while he was still there, while his scent was still on the pillow, while his laughter still echoed off the walls, it all made sense. Their love was made of pieces, and Elisa was willing to sew each one together with hope, even if the fabric was starting to tear. What she didn't know, and neither did I, was that there was a reason for each departure. A secret that he kept as if protecting something too dangerous to reveal. And that, sooner or later, this secret would reach her. And when it arrived, neither my glass nor my wood would be able to protect Elisa from what was to come. Elisa has always been a woman of small, profound gestures. And it was through these gestures that their love found form in the days when Noel was away. I became the place where promises were made, where love remained alive between absences and memories. Noel no longer knocked on the door, he left messages. Carefully folded letters, stuck between the cracks in the wood or hidden under the vase of lavender that Elisa left on the windowsill. And every time she found one of these letters, it was as if the world stopped to breathe a little. Do you miss me the way I miss you, when the silence of the night seems to scream your name? He wrote in one of the first ones. Elisa smiled as she read it, clutched the paper to her chest and whispered, as if he could hear. Every day, no, every day. She wrote back. In delicate handwriting, on stationery that smelled of old perfume. Sometimes she left the pages in the same place where he used to hide his. Sometimes she kept them for herself. Today I dreamed that you called me home, she wrote one night as the moonlight drew shadows on my glass. And I understood, without words, that it wasn't about the place, it was about the feeling. The neighbors saw her and whispered. They said she lived in the past, that their love was made more of absence than presence. But Elisa didn't care. She continued with her rituals. Each new letter from Santa was read as a prayer. Some came with dried petals, others with hand-drawn drawings, and still others brought small gifts, an old button, a key without a lock, a blurry photo of the two of them on a random bathroom mirror. One afternoon, with the sky gray and the smell of rain in the air, Noel showed up without warning. She opened the window before he even climbed the steps. You didn't say you were coming today, she said, surprised but not angry. He smiled as always. I needed to see you before the longing made more noise than my conscience. And is she quiet now? Not yet, but seeing you always quiets things down a bit. They hugged right there, in front of me, as if the time between them had disappeared. Noel rested his forehead against hers and closed his eyes. Promise me you'll still be here, if I come back tomorrow? And if I'm not? She answered, for the first time with a slight tremor in her voice. Then I'll know that I've waited too long for you. That night was different. More intense. More raw. They talked about things they had been avoiding. Noel told her about a place where he had spent the last week, about a decision he needed to make but didn't have the courage to make yet. Elisa listened in silence, absently fiddling with the necklace he had given her months before. Sometimes I feel like you're always leaving even when you're here. Maybe because I am, Elisa. Why? Because loving you scares me. She smiled sadly. And not loving you would destroy me. I, there, listening to each word pass through the air between them, felt that something was breaking, even though they both still tried to keep their love alive. Noel left before dawn, without much fanfare, just with a long kiss on her hand. I'll be back with the sun, I promise. Elisa stared at the street, her eyes watery, but her face serene. You never promise what you can deliver, Noel, but even so, I still believe. After that, the days returned to silence. But now, the silence had a new weight. The letters continued to come, but more spaced out. The petals came drier, and the promises more vague. One day I will explain everything to you, he wrote on a torn notebook sheet. Explain or leave me, she replied in a letter she never sent. I could feel Elisa starting to say goodbye. Even without admitting it. It took her longer to look back at the street. Her fingers no longer touched the curtains so carefully. She read the letters, yes, but she no longer kissed them. She just folded them, sighed, and put them away. And me? I wondered how much longer she could bear to love alone. Because waiting is beautiful, but only until the moment when waiting becomes disguised oblivion. And maybe that moment was closer than she imagined. The days began to drag on as if they had a fever. The clock seemed lazy, and even the light entered me differently, more opaque, more tired. Elisa no longer woke up as early, and sometimes she didn't even open my pages. When she did, it was no longer with that hope that made the air vibrate. It was with the automatic gesture of someone who no longer expects to find anything. The coffee went cold before being drunk. The bread sat on the table without anyone touching it. Time, which had previously been an accomplice to waiting, became a constant reminder of absence. Noel's last letter had arrived weeks ago. It contained only one handwritten line. I'm trying to fix everything, wait a little longer. Elisa read it over and over again, but the sentence seemed to wilt with each reading, like a forgotten flower out of water. A little longer, how much is a little longer, Noel? She murmured, her eyes fixed on the empty street. She began to write to him more intensely, but now the letters no longer had that light and passionate tone. They were harsh confessions, unanswered questions, words written like silent screams. You kept me waiting for so long that I began to doubt whether we really existed, or if it was all an invention of my loneliness. You say you still think about me before you go to sleep. You say you'll come back. But this time, you'll come for real. But the answers didn't come. And the silence, that old acquaintance, became too heavy even for me. There were days when Elisa wouldn't even go near the window. She would stay locked in her room, lying on her side, staring at the ceiling as if waiting for some answer to fall from there. Other times, she would walk around the house with slow steps, as if trying to find in every corner a sign that he still existed. One afternoon, she took all the letters out of the box. She spread them out on the floor of her room and made a circle with them. She sat in the middle and remained there, in silence, as if she were the center of their world. She cried slowly, with a cry that came from deep inside, the kind that hurts even the body. I did everything right, no, everything. She spoke as if she were talking to a ghost. That night, she lit candles around the bed, put on the music box, and lay down with one of his coats, which still held his scent. She stayed there for hours, watching the shadows dance on the ceiling, her eyes open but empty. Is loving someone who doesn't come back the same thing as forgetting yourself? She whispered, almost to me. The next day, a letter arrived. But this time, unlike all the others, it was not left with care. It was folded in a hurry, the paper crumpled, the ink smeared as if it had been written in the middle of a storm. Elisa unfolded it with trembling hands. She read it once, twice, 3 times. And then she fell to her knees on the floor. I need to tell you something. The truth. I'm not who you think I am. I was never just yours. Her world collapsed into silence. The words in the letter seemed to scratch the paper. I was never just yours, she repeated, as if it could have any other meaning. But it didn't. It was betrayal. It was a lie. It was everything she swore didn't exist between them. Elisa stayed on the floor for hours. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, her eyes wide, her hands clutching the letter until it was completely crumpled. I could feel my body trembling under the weight of what she was carrying. It was as if the world had stopped spinning at that moment. As if everything she believed in had shattered into 1,000 pieces, and none of them fit inside her anymore. But that wasn't what hurt me the most. What hurt me was when she got up, took all the letters, tied them with a ribbon, and put them in a cardboard box. I've been too foolish for too long, haven't I? She said, looking at me as if I could answer. But even fools deserve a dignified end. That night, for the first time since it all began, she slammed my sheets shut. She locked the lock. She drew the curtains. And she turned out the lights. I stood there, outside, staring into the darkness of the room. And I understood, time, the same time she used to count the days of waiting, was now the same time she would use to forget. Please try. After that night when Elisa closed my pages like someone closing an open wound, the house was plunged into a dense silence, so dense that even the sound of the wind seemed to ask permission to pass. I, who until then had been the place where hope lived, became a witness to oblivion. I no longer heard her light footsteps approaching in the morning, nor did I feel her hands gently opening the curtains. The room grew dark, and with it, it seemed that she also grew dark inside. Elisa had stopped hoping, but she could not, in fact, forget. Deep down, she could still hear my creaking, the sound of the leaves rustling in the wind, the sun trying to peek through the cracks. But she ignored it all. Because what hurt now wasn't the absence, it was the doubt. The doubt throbbed like a wound that would never heal. What if it was all a lie from the beginning? She asked one afternoon, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, without looking at me. What if I loved someone who only existed in my head? She began to reread all the letters. Every word, every comma, every exclamation point. She looked for clues, contradictions, lies hidden in beautiful metaphors. She began to write down dates, details, turning over memories like someone trying to put together a puzzle with missing pieces. He said he was coming back, but why did he come back? He said he loved me, but who did he love more? Who is Noel anyway? Elisa began to doubt even her own memory. She questioned whether he had really said what she remembered, whether his touches had been sincere, whether his eyes, when they smiled, were really there, or were they already somewhere else. I gave myself completely to someone who only gave me pieces, she said one night, writing in a notebook that had never existed before. Doubt ate away at her insides. She started leaving the house less, as if the world outside was a reflection of what she didn't want to face. She stopped answering her friends, avoided phone calls, pretended everything was fine when her mother called. "I'm busy, Mom. Just tired." "You seem so different, daughter. It's just work, I promise." But it wasn't work. It was love, that love that now seemed like a trap. Doubt took up residence inside her, invaded her routine, occupied the spaces of hope. And yet, every now and then, she still approached me, with slow steps, as if she were walking on shrapnel. She opened the door a crack. She looked at the street, and whispered, "What if he knocks on the door now? Should I open it?" She began to have nightmares. She dreamed of Noel saying things he had never said. She would wake up sweaty, with her heart racing, and write down what she remembered on a napkin, in a corner of the wall, on the fogged-up bathroom mirror. He said, "You knew it all along, you just pretended not to see it." He would look at me, but it was as if he were seeing someone else. He would leave even as he held me. On a rainy morning, she sat in front of me, with her hair disheveled and her eyes red. The street was empty, and the thunder tore through the sky as if it were too harsh an answer to such sensitive questions. "You saw everything, didn't you?" she asked me, as if I were more than wood and glass. "You saw him look at me, you saw him leave me. Tell me, did he really love me?" And at that moment, if I could have answered, I would have said yes. That there was love in the gestures, in the smiles, in the silences. But that perhaps love was not enough to stop someone from running away. And that, sometimes, those who love also hurt, also lie, also hide. She didn't wait for an answer. She just lay down on the floor, next to the window, with one of the letters in her hands. Loving someone who doesn't know how to love, is that a kind of cowardice? Or is it just loneliness disguised as courage? And I stood there, listening to the sound of the rain, feeling the scent of her pain spreading through the house, like an old perfume that never completely disappears. The love wasn't over. But now, it was covered by a blanket of doubt that weighed more than any longing. The news arrived like everything that truly hurts, without warning, without mercy, with the cruelty of something that can no longer be ignored. The sky was absurdly blue that morning, one of those days when the world seems too calm, as if it were disguising the tragedy that was about to happen. Elisa woke up late, with her hair disheveled, her eyes heavy and a strange feeling in her chest, as if something was about to collapse, but she didn't know what yet. She walked to the kitchen without rushing, opened the refrigerator, took an apple, took a reluctant bite. And that was when the intercom rang. "Mrs. Elisa? I have an envelope here. They left it last night. There is no sender. Can I go up?" She hesitated. For a second she thought about saying no, to leave it there. But something, maybe a spark of intuition, made her say yes. "You can go up, please." The doorman handed over the envelope carefully, as if he felt the weight it carried. It was beige paper, crumpled at the corners, closed with an improvised fold. There was no writing on the outside. Elisa took it to the table in the living room, sat down slowly, and stared at it for a few minutes, as if she could guess the contents just by looking at it. Then, with trembling fingers, he carefully opened it. A single sheet of paper, folded in 3 parts. The handwriting wasn't Noel's. "I know you deserve to know. Even if he doesn't have the courage to tell you, I do. My name is Mariana. I was, or still am, the other woman in Noel's life. I thought you needed to know." Elisa's world shattered without making a sound. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She just stood there, staring at the paper, while her eyes slowly filled with a tear that wouldn't fall. not yet. He said he loved you. I know that. But he also came to me every time he couldn't handle the love he felt for you. He told me he was confused, that he was torn, that he wanted to run away and stay at the same time. I was deceived too. He never chose. And now, I don't want him anymore either. I'm sorry. Elisa read and reread. She folded the paper, unfolded it. She stood up. She sat down again. The apple was still in her hand, bitten, forgotten. She put the envelope on the table, walked to the bedroom like a sleepwalker and sat on the floor, next to the bed, hugging her knees. He stayed there for long minutes in absolute silence. And then the first tear fell. Then the second. Then all of them together, like a dam that could no longer withstand the pressure. He lied to me, to her, to both of us, he whispered. The pain didn't come with anger, it came with discouragement. With the feeling that everything he had been built on quicksand. The letters, the meetings, the smiles, even the silences. Everything was suspect now. I was blind. I wanted to believe. I invented a whole man just with the pieces he gave me. She continued, between sobs. And once again she stood up, as if guided by an impulse greater than herself. She opened the closet, took out the box of letters, the music box, even a forgotten scarf of his, kept at the bottom of the drawer. She placed everything on the bed, one by one, as if she were looking at an exhibition of a past that she no longer knew was real. He looked me in the eyes when he said he loved me. How can someone lie like that? How can someone live like that? She walked over to me and violently opened my pages. The wind blew in, ruffling the papers on the bed. She let it go. You saw everything. You always saw it. Why didn't I see it? Why didn't I want to see it? At that moment, if I could speak, I would have said that she was not blind. That those who truly love do not see with distrust, they see with hope. That it is not stupidity, it is surrender. It is purity. But I was just wood, glass, wind. And what Elisa needed now was to face the reality that was finally in front of her. With determined steps, she picked up a large bag and began to put everything inside. The letters, the music, the memories. She paused for a moment as she held the first letter he had given her, written in blue pen with crude drawings of flowers around it. She kissed the paper for the last time. Thank you, but that's enough. That's enough. She went down the stairs with the bag in her hands. From where I was, I saw her cross the street, stop in front of the trash can on the corner, stand there for a few seconds, and then let it all out. No drama, no scene. She just let it go. Like someone letting go of something that should have been gone a long time ago. She stood there, staring at the trash can, as if she was still waiting for something to ask to be saved. But nothing asked. And she turned her back. When he returned home, he slowly went upstairs, entered his room, and lit a candle in the corner of the window. He watched the flame for several minutes. Then he looked up at the sky. I was stronger than I thought I was. And more foolish than I deserved. But now I know. And that's enough. That night, for the first time, she slept with the window closed, the curtains drawn, the light off. And even in the darkness, even with the pain still bleeding, there was something new on her face. Peace. Peace of those who, even though wounded, chose not to drag themselves along any longer. The last day was not announced with clarions or obvious signs. It arrived subtly, like the end of a song that fades into silence. The sky was cloudy, but not heavy. That light gray that promises neither rain nor sun, only a diffuse light that makes everything slower, more intimate, more delicate. The wind swayed the leaves of the mango tree with a different softness, almost like a whisper. The window that held so many days, so many tears, so many aborted new beginnings, opened my leaves as always, but with the strange feeling that it would be the last time. It took longer than usual for Elisa to appear. The house was silent, her footsteps didn't echo on the wooden floor, there was no smell of coffee in the air, no soft music coming from the room. But when she appeared, there was something different about her. She was wearing a blue dress, made of light fabric, which danced with the wind around her. Her hair was loose, her face clean, without makeup. Her bare feet touched the floor as if they were part of it. And in her hands, a new white mug, with a delicately painted flower. She approached me without haste, without the anxiety she had felt before, without her heart pounding. She sat down on the windowsill, placed her mug beside her and calmly crossed her legs. She looked at the street, not with expectation, but with acceptance. And then she spoke as if she were talking to an old friend. Today marks exactly 316 days since the first time I waited for him. He paused for a long time. He lightly touched the window glass and looked past the power lines at the sky that was beginning to open up. I counted each one, not out of obsession, but because, somehow, it kept me going, as if recording the pain was my way of resisting it. There, in that moment, this wasn't just another day of waiting. It was the last. The end of a silent, intense, and devastating cycle. Elisa wasn't there for Noel. She was there for herself. She pulled a notebook from her lap, the same one she'd started writing in after the pain turned to doubt, and the doubt turned to loneliness. She opened it to the last page, picked up a pen, and began to write. Calmly, lightly, with a conviction that moved me. Today I stopped waiting for you. Not because I stopped loving, but because, finally, I understood that loving someone doesn't have to mean abandoning yourself. You were my most beautiful dream, but also my cruelest mistake. And I deserve more than the remains of your presence. He closed the notebook, ran his hand slowly over the cover, and smiled. A small smile, but a genuine one. Of relief. Of liberation. You saw everything, right? She asked me, looking at me. You saw me on the days when I smiled alone just remembering his voice, and also on the days when I cried myself to sleep sitting here. You saw me waiting for him like someone waiting for salvation. And you saw me being forgotten without even a goodbye. The wind blew through my cracks, as if it wanted to embrace her. She leaned her forehead against the glass and closed her eyes. I thought that's what love was, waiting, sacrifice, absence with a pretty name. But now I know that love, true love, starts inside us. She stood there for a long time, watching the street. There was no one passing by, no horns, no sound of familiar footsteps. For the first time, the emptiness outside didn't create despair. It created peace. That was when she got up. With firm movements, she went to the closet, opened the door and took out a blue suitcase. Inside, she put some clothes, her notebook, a book with pages marked by dried flowers, an old photo of her as a child, sitting on her grandmother's lap. Next to the suitcase, she left a note stuck with a magnet to the refrigerator. Take care of the plants. Take care of the window. I went to take care of myself. Then she went back to her room. She ran her fingers slowly over the furniture, as if saying goodbye to old friends. She looked in the mirror and for a moment, smiled at herself. As if she recognized there, the woman who had disappeared almost a year ago. He leaned against the door frame and looked around the room for a few seconds. The bed with its sheets pulled taut, the shelves organized, the scent of lavender in the air. There was no pain in his eyes. There was memory, but not the kind of memory that holds you back. It was the kind of memory that teaches you, that forms the basis for what comes next. Finally, he came back to me. He touched my frame affectionately as if to thank me. You were my confidant, my most faithful companion. And I know that when I leave, you will still be here, waiting another story. She bowed slightly as if she were paying a curtsy. Then she closed my pages slowly, not with anger, not with sadness, but with respect, like someone who closes a book after reading the last sentence and still feels like they will carry it with them forever. He picked up his suitcase, took a deep breath, opened the door and left. The sound of the door closing was dry, clean. And then silence took over the house. But not that silence filled with absence. It was a light silence, of a new beginning. Outside, the sky began to lighten. The shy sun slipped through the clouds and landed on the living room floor, illuminating the trail left by Elisa's bare feet. The light touched every corner of the house as if to say, now is the time. But I stayed, made of wood, glass and memory, keeping the 316 days in which she loved alone, waited in silence, got lost in someone, until she found herself again. Now, I would wait for other mornings, other silences, other lives, but I will never forget. And so the last day of waiting ended. Not with tears, not with screams, but with a woman saying to herself, "I am enough." And with that, the whole world began to change. The sun rose that day as it does every other day, but it seemed to do so more quickly, with less ceremony, as if it knew there would be no more eyes at the window waiting for its light. And I, who had always been the frame for Elisa's eyes to the world, found myself there, open, empty, exposed. The morning air entered without the resistance of her fingers pushing my sheets, without the aroma of coffee rising from the kitchen, without the light tapping of her bare feet on the wooden floor. The whole house seemed to have held its breath. She left. Elisa left, and the time here inside changed. The first morning without her was an immense field of silence. The walls, which had previously carried echoes of shy laughter, of murmured conversations with letters, of whispers on the phone, were bare. The wind blew stronger, scattering a piece of paper she had forgotten on the table, a sheet with a few crossed-out words, perhaps an unfinished thought, perhaps a memory she had decided not to take with her. I read it from there, even from a distance, even without sound. The love that taught me to wait now teaches me to leave. And I understood. Elisa didn't run away from Noel. She left to be herself again. As the hours passed, I began to hear different sounds. The crackle of the ceiling warming in the sun, the creak of a loose chair in the living room, the distant chime of a wind chime she'd left hanging on the porch. It wasn't just absence, it was transformation. The energy of the house was shifting, as if the very structure knew something had ended. Outside, life went on in a hurry. The sun crossed the sky without stopping. Children ran along the sidewalk. A couple argued quietly on the corner. The usual neighbor watered her plants without looking up. And I watched it all, but with a kind of emptiness in my chest that I had never felt before. Because, for the first time in 317 days, there was no one behind me, leaning on me, waiting. Elisa's last day here was the most beautiful, and the cruelest. When she looked down the street, wearing that blue dress that so captured the image of our first encounters, I knew. She wouldn't go back. Not because she no longer loved, but because her love had grown in another direction, toward herself. It was a gesture of courage, yes, but also of pain. The pain of leaving what still beats, even if it beats wrong. I remember when she closed my eyes with affection, like someone who closes the eyes of someone who is sleeping peacefully. It was different from all the other times. Before, when she closed me, it was with anger, with sadness, with hopelessness. But on that last day, there was tenderness. There was gratitude. Now, alone, I look at every corner of this house and see traces of Elisa everywhere. The glass she always used is there, on the shelf. A pair of earrings forgotten in the bathroom. A book with a dry leaf marking the last page read. They are small presences that scream in silence. And it is in this silence that I hear everything. I hear what she never said out loud. I hear the hope slowly fading away. I hear the nights she pretended to be fine. I hear the smiles she practiced so no one would suspect the loneliness that lived with her. And now that the house is empty, every sound from outside comes in stronger. The sun passes without stopping, and with it, the days. The morning after he left, Noel showed up. He came slowly, without making any noise, as if he were not sure whether he would be welcomed. He was wearing a wrinkled shirt, with sunken eyes, and an unshaven beard. He was carrying a wilted flower in his hands, perhaps a belated attempt to mend the irreparable. When he stopped in front of me, he looked inside as if he could see it there, sitting on the windowsill, waiting. But she wasn't. He knocked hesitantly on the door. Twice. He waited, and the silence answered. Then he took something out of his pocket, a crumpled sheet of paper with handwritten words on it. He read it to himself, then sighed and set it on the floor, weighed down by a stone. He looked at me one last time. And he left. Without tears. Without explanations. Perhaps now he knew what it was to wait and not be waited for. On the paper, which the wind later brought to me, it was written, "Lisa, I'm back. Too late, perhaps. But I'm back. Not to ask for anything. Just to say that you were the most beautiful love that I didn't know how to live." And I wonder, how many stories fall apart like this? In silence, in emptiness, in almost. How many Elisas leave every day? How many Santas only appear after the sun has set? The house remained untouched for another week. Then a real estate agent showed up. He took pictures of the rooms, opened doors, and commented on the good natural lighting. Not a word about love. No mention of letters, petals, or promises. Just numbers, measurements, values. But I'm still here. I still remember. Every night she wrote to me with tears in her eyes. Every time she held back her laughter just because he sent her an audio message saying, "I miss you." Every silent goodbye. The sun passes without stopping. Now, it passes through me every day with no one to feel its warmth inside. But I keep going, because I know, one day, maybe someone else will come closer, open my leaves with hope, lean their elbows on me, and begin a new wait, or, who knows, a new encounter. Because love has this cruel and beautiful gift of starting over where everything seemed to have ended. And while the sun continues its path without pauses, I will be here, made of wood, glass, and longing. I still remember her eyes. Even now, after so many days of silence, after so many mornings when the sun shines through my window without finding anyone on the other side, I can still remember, with an almost painful clarity, how Elisa looked at the world. It wasn't an ordinary look. It wasn't just observing, it was feeling. She looked with her whole body, with her heart wide open, with a silent courage that few noticed, but I noticed. Because I was always here, still, present, while everyone came and went. Elisa's eyes had the gift of transforming the banal into poetry. A vendor passing by with baskets of bread on his head, a cat crossing the street in a hurry, a neighbor absent-mindedly watering his plants, everything was a movie to her. And I was the screen, the frame through which she saw the world while she waited, while she dreamed, while she loved. The days since her departure have been slow. The house remains closed but not abandoned. It is as if it still breathes, only more subdued. The air is denser, time more suspended. Every corner of the living room, the hallway, her bedroom, carries a story. And I, who was always made of wood and glass, am now made of memories. Sometimes the wind invades my spaces and brings the smell of the living city outside. Sometimes it also brings voices, conversations from other windows, laughter from other Elisas who don't yet know they're going to leave. And in those moments, I close my memory's eyes and see her there, with her hair loose, her head leaning against my window, her eyes fixed on the end of the street, waiting. Always waiting. But it wasn't just Noel she was waiting for. It was answers. For herself. For a love that didn't hurt. For a chance to be whole. And in the end, she got it. Elisa left with her small suitcase, but she left so much of herself here that it's still hard to believe she's gone. The note on the fridge, the notebook forgotten under the bed, the dried flowers stuck between the pages of a book. Things that no one would notice. But I noticed. Because these things, these small presences, still keep the sound of her laughter inside these walls. A few days ago, someone new came into the house. A young woman, perhaps in her early 30s, with a curious look and a light way of walking. She opened the windows, let the wind in, walked through each room carefully, as if feeling the space before taking possession. She stopped in front of me, ran her hand along my frame, looked outside and smiled. What a beautiful view. It feels like you can see the past from here. I shivered. Or rather, I imagined that if I could have, I would have. Because that's exactly what happened. She saw. She felt. She realized that there was more than just old walls and worn boards. There was a living history between those cracks. Over the next few days, she cleaned, reorganized, and painted. She changed the curtains but kept my structure. She painted it white but left the wood details exposed. It was as if she understood that she didn't need to erase what had been, just give it new meaning. And one day, she brought someone. A man. Curly hair, easy laugh, hands that spoke as much as his mouth. They laughed all the time, bumped into each other in the kitchen, danced awkwardly in the middle of the living room. It was another kind of love. Lighter, more present. Still shy, but full of promise. And I, watching from afar, understood. Life goes on. Love returns. The window opens again. But Elisa still lives here. Not as absence, but as essence. She taught this place to feel. And she taught me, who am only wood and glass, that the strongest love is the one that sets you free. Noel never came back. After that note left in the wind, he disappeared like smoke. Maybe he understood that losing Elisa was the punishment for all the empty promises. Or maybe he simply followed the path of those who don't know how to stay. He never knew how to love completely, and Elisa didn't fit in half. And sometimes, on nights when everything is quieter, when the moon draws silhouettes on the living room floor, I see her. Not with my eyes, but with everything that's left of her. The image of her sitting here, looking at the world, feeling things like no one else. Her eyes full of questions. Her heart full of courage. She didn't need answers. She needed herself. And she gave herself. The new resident once found Elisa's notebook. It was between the wall and the furniture, as if it had hidden itself there to be found at the right time. She opened it slowly, leafed through it carefully, and read a few pages. She didn't cry, but she remained silent for a long time, sitting on the floor, with tears in her eyes. "Who are you?" she asked, without waiting for an answer. And then he smiled. "Whoever you were strong." And then he closed the notebook, put it in a drawer, and lit a candle in front of the window. He stood there looking out at the street. For a moment, I thought it was Elisa again. But it wasn't. It was someone new, living a new beginning. And I, as always, was watching. The world changes. Love changes. But some stories stay forever. And I still remember her eyes. Because no one has ever looked at me like Elisa. No one has ever loved, waited, resisted like she did. And even if other windows open, even if other eyes see me, there will always be a space in me that belongs to her. Elisa, the woman who waited until she learned to leave. The woman who loved until she learned to love herself. And while time continues to run out there, I will be here, silent, ready to hold the next story, but never forgetting her eyes.